So since we're about like a month plus ish away from the anniversary over here on the NA version of the game, and that brings another very powerful support type servant in Koyanskaya to the game, I thought I'd make a video kind of talking about which card type is right for you, or I might, title the video what looping type is right for you. But it's the same general principle of which of these supports is going to be able to draw out the most power from your account, because this might be some shocking news for some people, but just because you have, say, Koyanskaya or Scotty, and this was a huge rude awakening for people during the 3rd year anniversary, just because you have them does not mean you can loop. Some of these supports are going to work differently with your boxes than other servants, and I'm going to kind of make this a guide in general. I'm even including a ruler Scotty over here just kind of for the future proofing of this video to kind of talk about which ones are going to help your box out the most. But before we actually begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content. Also, if you want to see me play FGO live, I do that every single weekday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on my Twitch. So make sure you peep that in the description, linked down below if you're interested in that. But let's go ahead and start diving right into this discussion video. And I'm going to rip the band-aid off right here, right now, and say that Castoria, I still believe, is the easiest for most boxes to go ahead and use, because Castoria is tailor-made to make basically every single art servant, with very few exceptions, just kind of loop all over the place. Even the ones that really can't loop off their NP will be seeing a dramatic increase in their ability to loop with their arts cards, because she, again, is pretty specifically made to make arts insanely, ridiculously good, and also just is very nice in most accounts as well, because a double Castoria setup can offer you 60% NP, because one Castoria gives 30% to everybody, the other gives 30%. So in very odd farming setups, she's also really, really good because she doesn't have targeted batteries. She can just kind of give this 60% to everyone, right? She does have targeted batteries, but like she also has this ability to kind of split them apart, right? Being able to give 30% here and being able to give 20% here gives her a lot of versatility. And then also being able to massively gas up your allies' NP gain rates by 30% is also not nothing, in conjunction with a 50% arts buff. All the other stuff that Castoria does is kind of just bonus, right? Like all of this just makes her even better. The invincibility, the fact that like her NP does not have a single bad effect on it, that's all kind of bonus to the fact that as a card support type servant, she gives everything they could ever want. A lot of NP, a really nice NP gain buff for some of those servants that may not have high enough NP gain or may have lower hits on their NPs, and then a fat card buff that is just also going to be just generally good as a card support type servant. I do believe she's the easiest for most people to use, but that's where this kind of starts to split a little bit, right? Because then we have Koyanskaya, right? Koyanskaya is technically a little bit more restrictive when it comes to using her, right? Because ideally, Koyanskaya wants to be paired with like 50% battery servants. Those are like her ideal targets. You can still make 30% work. You just kind of need Oberon for that, because Oberon will then give you 70% in conjunction with your normal servants 30%, and that'll kind of fix out everything. Oberon was literally what Koyanskaya needed to allow her to be even more versatile, because if you're not aware, if you don't know what Koyanskaya does, I'll drop a review when she drops over on NA, but basically this is like the main Big Mac Daddy thing that Koyanskaya is doing. Because a lot of your buster servants have their 50% battery skill on a 6-turn cooldown. So what this lets you do is it lets you loop their battery skill. For an example, I just have Drake pulled up over here. Most of your 50% are on some kind of 6-turn cooldown with this massive 50% battery skill. So you can go ahead and like pop that on the first wave. Then that's like 1 turn of cooldown. Double Koyanskaya on the second wave gets you back to 100% NP because it's 50-50, and it knocks 4 turns of cooldown because double Koyanskaya. And by wave 3, your skill is back up. You have 50%. Someone like Oberon comes in, dumps another 50, and then even if you're a 30% battery servant, you only got your 30 back. Don't worry, Oberon can give you another 20% on his NP damage skill. The first skill is Charisma, I believe. And so that allows you to just completely just annihilate stages with with some of these servants. The only restriction is that you gotta have somebody like that. Now, I get that's not the most restrictive thing on the planet. I do get that. Most players are probably going to have a decent Buster AoE servant that has a 50% battery or at least has a 30%, right? Like most people will probably find themselves like a Drake, a Lancer Artoria, even like a normal Artoria, a Mordred, a Gilgamesh, something along those lines, whether they're limited or non-limited, at some point during their time playing the game. But I'm thinking about it from the lines that Castoria is a bit easier to use. There's a lot of leeway on being able to mess up with Castoria because it quite literally is press all of the buttons and then just let your art servant absolutely cook. Whereas Koyanskaya can be a little less forgiving if you don't exactly know what you're doing. It can be kind of just said as like a skill issue maybe, but I do think you can't even say that like, well, maybe Castoria just has better free-to-play options because during Lost Belt 6, Koyanskaya will actually get a very strong, technically free-to-play option in Caster Coup, who becomes available on the Morgan banner and gets a buff that makes him quite good as a Buster AoE servant if you don't have someone that can't do that job for him. Now, this is also me kind of looking at Koyanskaya and Castoria kind of just head-to-head. Oberon throws a huge wrench in that mix because at the very least, when it's just Koyanskaya going head-to-head with Castoria, the battle is, can you have an art servant that is good enough to loop 100% of their NP, or do you have a Buster servant that does enough damage because you no longer care about looping your NP? Koyanskaya is taking care of that for you effectively, and even if you don't have Oberon, you can plug it in like a waiver who is going to be free during the anniversary, so you can still find that extra 50% if you have a 50% Buster AoE servant, but you still do actually need to secure the kills. Again, Oberon throws a wrench in that because Oberon essentially says, you're going to kill. You're going to absolutely eviscerate that person. But again, looking at the perspective of there's going to be a lot of very, very hype banners back to back to back to back to back. You're going to have people like Morgan, Castoria herself coming out, Melusine who comes out who actually has a 100% battery as a Buster AoE servant. You do have to keep her in her Ascension 1 to 2 and then transition, but still you get what I'm getting at, right? You have a 100% option that comes out that's really good for Koyanskaya, but then that's another 5, so you got to go for Koyanskaya herself and then Oberon. So you could also say that I'm making the argument of Castoria is less investment. Like once you get Castoria, you're kind of just done. But Koyanskaya, you gotta go find like Oberon as well, because then you could have the same arguable problem that the arts guys are having. Arts guys may struggle with some of the weaker arts AoEs, like say someone like Nero or Caskill, who definitely have a very rough time looping their NPs. But Koyanskaya, if your box is maybe a bit weaker, your servants might not be able to actually clear some of those nodes, and thus that would kind of be their equivalent of the arts looping problem. It's more of a damage issue for them. So you could take the argument I'm making as Castoria being a much easier, lower investment servant that you need, whereas Koyanskaya, if you really want to hit those absolute maximum highs that she's capable of producing and actually having the best farming setup in the game, which contains both her and Oberon, you do gotta go for at least 2 limited servants, which can be a little bit rough. Now, you guys may have noticed that I have not talked about Scotty over here, and that is because Scotty has like the issues of looping with some of her quick servants and also has the issue of damage that Koyanskaya can find, and that's with them just both individually. Why is that the case? Well, quick servants don't loop as well as art servants, and they really need to find a lot of that damage, so you really got to go high investment with them. That's where like the NP3 thing that a lot of people have as a preconceived notion, you don't really need that all of the time, right? Like say for instance on JP, I'm finding a lot of success with someone like say an NP1 Ibuki Doji, and on NA I'm also finding success with like an NP2 Berserker Musashi, an NP2 Space Ishtar. I can see that it's like, yeah, having the NP2 is good, but it's still definitely doable at NP1, right? Because you're not really lacking in damage and you're looping so well that it's not really like you're super far behind on NP. But with quick servants, you absolutely must be doing insane amounts of damage at like NP3 to be securing that overkill, which if you don't know what that means, basically let's say a servant has like 10 hits on their AoE NP. Let's say the first 3 hits actually kill the enemy. It does like 10,000 damage, 10,000 damage, 15,000 damage. You're able to kill the enemy on the 3rd hit. Now all of those subsequent hits are going to be getting overkill and refunding much more NP. And that's where quick servants really shine in being able to secure that overkill, because they really need that, because the quick card is not as strong as the arts card when it comes to looping. So that's where Scotty really struggles, is that you kind of have to go absolutely balls deep into like setting up your quick setup. And that's what I was referring to when people during the 3rd anniversary had a very rude awakening. That's actually one of the times where I was really feeling like I should start making content, because, and I believe I actually made a video called Should You Quit Over Scotty very, very early on into the life cycle of my channel, because of like this reason. It was like, look, even if you pull Scotty, you're going to want stuff like a very, very strong like NP4, NP5 Berserker Lancelot at the bare minimum. You're going to want like an NP2 Dante's at the bare minimum. NP3 would be nice. You're going to really want stuff like a Max Limit Broken K-Scope. Like, these are things that are very, very, very high end. Like, you really need to sink a lot of investment to get the quick looping to work, but it was rewarding for people that could get it done. Someone like Castoria kind of alleviates that issue, because she could take a lot more, like a wider range of her servants, those being the art servants, make them loop. And then she also has the added benefit that she can give them 100% battery. So even if they're lacking in a little bit of damage, you can just slap on a Black Grail and massively make up for a lot of that damage you're lacking in. And again, she can give you 100% back. And that's one of the benefits, and again, reasons that I think Castoria is really beneficial, and probably would be my pick for like most new players, especially because she is just very, very easy to use. Now, again, not saying that during Lost Belt 6 you should potentially skip out on like Koyanskaya or all of them. Like, optimally, you just scoop all of them up, right? You just grab everybody and then you go about your day. But if you got to pick like select servants to go after, Castoria is still a very, very strong one to go for, as is Koyanskaya. But Scotty, I mean, I know she comes out later on this year, but it's very unfortunate, because when she does come out, I don't think I'm going to be making the whole video of like, oh, is she a must summon? It's going to be like, man, should you even still summon for Scotty? Because if you got Castoria and you got Koyanskaya, are you really going to use Scotty? Like, maybe not, unless you just really like Scotty like me and you're just a huge Skahawk simp, but that's a whole different point entirely. Now, Scotty Ruler does kind of alleviate some of these issues, and that's because of the 1-2 punch she has with her first and second skill. You get the massive 50% quick buff that you get over here that this one gives you over here on her first skill, but then she also gives you an additional 15% over here. So effectively, each Scotty is now giving 65%, totaling with double ruler Scotty for an additional 30%, plus the ability now, because we have another really strong quick support type servant, it also gives you the ability to plug suit out for another Scotty if you really need extra buffs. And it's also really nice for, like, say, wave 3, we can smack him with his defense down, which is something ruler Scotty also does a bit better, is that she gives the attack buff instead. Because this is only viable for one node, you can carry this through all 3. So it definitely improves quick a lot. It's why I'm saying that quick is not exactly dead, because Scotty does help out a lot. But again, it still almost feels a little bit like Cope. And I know that, like, I just made a video like a couple months ago being like, no, quick is still like really strong. You can still use it, because it is, you could still use it, but it's kind of like doing the same level of investment that you're doing for Koyanskaya, but for less of a result, right? Like, you can do the 1-2 punch of Scotty and Scotty over here, but that's not going to be as strong as the 1-2 punch of Koyanskaya and Oberon. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Again, just to kind of reiterate, because, you know, this has been a little bit longer, we've been throwing stuff all over the place. I think Castoria is like the most beginner friendly to use. I think she's the easiest to use. She really allows you a lot of flexibility with the ability to give somebody 100%, you know, if you don't have as strong of a box, especially with next year's anniversary, being able to pick up a free Black Grail, stuff like that can really help out how easy it is to use someone like Castoria. Koyanskaya is a little bit more effort, but as long as you're willing to put in that effort and go a little bit farther, you will get much better results than you do with Castoria. It's kind of like much easier to use, little more investment, way more results. This is basically, you're going to put in the same amount of effort that you are going to do for, say, Koyanskaya, maybe even more effort, arguably, for still a lesser result. So that's kind of the ordering here, how it goes. I don't know if that's like really just profound news to anybody, but it's still very fun to talk about. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace late, guys.